what's your thoughts on proteins? And then do you have an opinion on the types, animal, plant, and everything else in between?
Yeah, I believe protein has to be prioritized for everybody. And the RDA, the recommended dietary allowance for protein, is way too low for optimal health and longevity, including aging. And what we know about the RDAs is that they were designed to prevent deficiency, right? Not optimize health and muscle health and longevity. So the RDA currently is set at 0.36 grams per pound, right?
0.36, okay.
Which is way too low, especially if you're trying to lose muscle or gain, or even as you get older. It's pretty much consensus across the board among scientists in this regard. It's not controversial, right? It's you need to get more protein than the RDA, probably at minimal double that, right? To maintain muscle as you get older, because as you age, you lose muscle tissue naturally, right? Starts at 30 if you're sedentary, then it accelerates at 40, then by 50 you're losing it at an even faster rate. It's almost like nature goes, we don't need you anymore, you can go, right? And if you don't do something about it, like optimize protein and resistance train, then you're gonna lose muscle tissue with age. And then what does that lead to? That leads to weakness, less functional strength. Now you're depending on other people, falls, fractures, lower quality of life. But if you optimize protein and train, you can avoid all that.
So what are you recommending in terms of the dosage of protein?
Yeah, so I think that at minimum, we're looking at 0.7 grams per pound of body weight at minimum. And some of the studies have even looked at 1.5 grams per pound of body weight to optimize fat loss, I think. Which
when you actually put that into practice, it's quite a bit, isn't it? Well, it is. I was talking to Gabrielle Leon. I don't know if you.
Yes,
and she was saying, 1.5 to 2 grams per pound. And I tried to do it, and I'm sort of, I suppose I'm not the typical person because I really take all this stuff seriously all the time and try experiment. But it was, particularly if you're training, you've got to work a lot to get that into you.
You do.
And you can kind of understand why. If you did do that, there's not a huge amount of space to do a lot else either.
2 is pretty high.
Yeah.
Even 1.5 is high. So I really like, at least 0.7, maybe up to 1. And you do have to be intentional because the average intake of protein in our country at breakfast is like 8 to 10 grams. People eat carbs for breakfast.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. Yeah.
So think about what can people have for breakfast besides eggs and Greek yogurt. I mean, I personally have to add protein into something, whether it's Greek yogurt, oatmeal, or a shake in the morning to get my protein up. And yeah, you do have to be super intentional with getting your protein. But most people would benefit from eating more protein and less carbs or fat. They would instantly improve their diet if they did that.
But I do find that if you do prioritize it, then you naturally you're quite full, really.
Right?
It is pretty filling. I find. So when you mentioned breakfast, then what would be a good time, and then a sort of a good breakfast in terms of meeting those protein needs? And do you look at those meals per, okay, well, if you have your breakfast, this is sort of how much protein I think you should kick off with?
Yeah. So in general, practically speaking, 1 to 2 palm-sized portions of protein per meal across 3 to 4 meals a day.
And what would that be as a gram?
That would match basically your body size if you did that, right? Because everybody's hand is typically proportional to their body size. So for females, about 1. For guys, it would be closer to 2 per meal, palm-sized portions per meal. That would be about the 0.7, if you will. I mean, of course, we could break each food source and look at the grams per, of protein per food source and do that, but that's from a practical standpoint.
Yeah. And what would you be getting though in terms of grams?
Yeah, so an egg is like 7 grams of protein, right? A tub of Greek yogurt is like maybe 12 to 15. So in general, if you did it by weight, like for me, I'm 126 pounds. So I need about 100 grams a day. So if you divide that, into 4 meals a day, you're looking at 25.
Right. Around about 25 for your first meal. And when have you got any views about when you should have that first meal? in relation
It
to when you
depends
wake?
on who you're talking to and what the scientists say. There's no real ideal time to have that, except if you're a performance athlete. If you're a performance athlete and you have to train, then in general you want to have it around your workout time. But it could be anything. It could be within a fast. So what you're following a fast and you want to eat it within that window. It could be eat a big breakfast meal. It just depends on what you're trying to achieve and who you are. Yeah.
So with that fasting, what's your views on, let's say, a 24-hour fast, the intermittent, or some kind of time restricted eating? Have you found, like I've been doing a time restricted eating, 16/8, which I think it works quite well for my lifestyle because of the way I work. I eat less because even when I'm traveling and even if I get in late, it's like, okay, I've passed my time for eating. So normally you'd probably get something, and because I've got that sort of upper and lower limit, I put everything in between. And so generally, I'm not eating at times where I'd be tempted to snack and stuff.
Yeah.
But do you have any views on any of those kind of restricted or intermittent fasting?
I do. And so when you look at the research around fasting, and as you said, there's different forms of fasting. There's 24-hour fasting. There's, they call it alternate day fasting. Eat a day, then don't eat a day. And then within a day, there's time restricted eating, where you restrict eating within a certain window. And the major benefit to fasting, regardless of type, is that people tend to reduce their calorie intake by around 20 to 25% when they adopt one of these types of fasting. That's the main benefit that you'll see. And so it's a great weight management tool for individuals that can adhere to that, right? Now, in our country, people eat typically across a 15-hour time frame, from their first, calorie intake with maybe cream in their coffee to the last bites. It tends to be a pretty big window. And so then if you restrict it down to 8 hours, you can see how it would reduce people's calorie intake. So for people who don't want to be told what to eat, they don't want to change their eating habits, they just want to lose weight and try to do a simple way to do that, it's a good idea for them to restrict their eating, and then they're going to do what you do. They're not going to eat as much. And then they're going to reduce their calorie intake, and then they're going to lose weight.
Do you recommend doing like a once a month or a certain amount of times a year where you do like a longer fast and the reason I ask that is I've sort of experimented with that. And I do find that once you've actually been through it psychologically, it's like, well, it almost sort of resets your willpower, I feel, because you've done that. So it's like, okay, well, now I can be, I've got through just looking at food and not eating anything. So anything now is you seem to have more self-control. I do. I don't know whether you've seen or experienced that at all.
So obviously fasting has been part of certain cultures for a long, long time. I don't know that it's been studied where long duration fastings or water fasting has specific physiological benefits or psychological benefits to them. I'm not familiar if there's been studies on that or not. I think the closest thing we know is in rodent research, where a lot of the fasting and the physiological benefits are studied. When they're given a time-restricted eating plan, well, their metabolism is way different than ours. So when you restrict rats to like eating, within an 8-hour window, it's like several days in their physiology. And they'll see a lot of benefits physiologically in rodents. I don't know that it translates to humans because I don't know that it's been studied. But to your point, if it helps you, like you feel a benefit, you psychologically get a benefit, why not?
You mentioned the speed of your metabolism. Could, if you're doing intermittent or any kind of fasting, could that slow your metabolism down because you're not getting the amount of food, and then cause you to hold on to fat, for example?
No. What tends to happen when you look at the research is, when people restrict calories severely, their metabolism will flex. It's called metabolic adaptation. It'll probably downregulate 10% or so. The longer they restrict calories, or they're more severely they restrict calories, then it flexes even further. And then it can lead to what's called fat overshooting. And we
Never
saw
heard of
this
that.
in the Biggest Loser studies, where obviously the Biggest Losers from that show, they restricted calories severely for a long time, right? And they did like crazy amounts of exercise. Well, when you did follow-up, when they did the follow-up studies on these individuals, what they found was that a lot of them gained more weight than before. And it was until they restored their lean body mass that they had lost. And so it might have to do with the fact that the body wants to restore the lean mass. Maybe it has to do with survival. I don't know. But in general, if you're reducing calories slightly, let's say 10 to 20% of your calories, your body's not going to like do some massive shift and like make you gain extra weight, you know, if you're doing that for a short period of time or here and there. But if you're dieting too long and too hard for extended period of time, yeah, it can lead to that fat overshooting.